Hello and welcome to this stream about feminism in Spain. I'd like to welcome Pox Populi. I should greet him in Spanish because half of the title is in Spanish. I don't want to be done for false advertising, so we'll greet each other in Spanish and then we shall continue in English. So, ¿qué tal todo? Poch Populi.
¿Qué pasa, Pisha? ¿Cómo estás, güey?
Todo bien, todo bien. ¿Qué tal todo en la tierra de las aceitunas?
Bueno, en la tierra de aceituna, todo bien, todo bien. Bueno, hoy ha sido un día regular, un día regulinchi, pero bueno,
Ok, no se puede quejar entonces.
nada, no se puede
Okay,
quedar.
okay, we'll continue now in English. So, Pox Populi, thank you very much for coming on. We'll start by talking about I suppose, your impression of what you saw when you first arrived in Spain in terms of the feminist culture and how it's progressed in the last number of years under your watch.
Under my watch, yeah, if only. Yeah, so it's really interesting, actually, my life with feminism, because of all the things that I've been red pilled on over the years. Feminism hasn't been one of them. I've been red pilled on feminism since I was, basically a knee high toddler. For one reason or another, I just really cottoned on quickly to feminism, like at a kind of creepily young age, like eerily young age. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but because it's kind of strange actually. But even as a very small child, watching like adverts where the girls were always better than the boys, or the father was always just an idiot, and the mother was always having to come in and save the day and be perfect, or Saturday morning cartoons and television programs where the boys were always outdone by the girls physically, mentally, whatever. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, this is not a reflection of my life experience, what little I had at that age, but still, at all. Like, you know, girls were always breaking down in tears in physical education class because they couldn't do it, or they weren't interested at all. Uh, in my house, my dad was a hardworking handyman who solved lots of problems. Sometimes he'd come home after a full day at work at the factory, and he would be the one that cooked dinner. Even so, he knew how to cook, he knew how to clean, he was doing all sorts of stuff. So it's like these retarded fathers in television programs and in adverts were just not a reflection of my dad at all. And so I was really suspicious of all this feminist stuff. So that is to say that when I came to Spain, it wasn't very difficult for me to quickly see that this country is actually a feminist dictatorship. It is a matriarchy, and the feminism here is out of control. Like, um, I haven't been in an English speaking country in a while, but I grew up in them, and I keep an eye on what's going on in English speaking countries. But there are times where I feel like the feminism in Spain is actually surpassing the feminism, even the countries where certain waves of feminism originated from. So a lot of the feminism actually in Spain, it it derives from your typical Andrea Dworkin, basically misandrist feminism, but it has now become so ingrained in Spanish culture. It is now almost, I would say it's as a part of Spanish culture as flamenco and eating tapas and sunny days on the beach. It is everywhere. And it is also a fundamental pillar of Spanish government, regardless of whichever party is in power. It doesn't matter if it's the left, the right, the center. This is now a pillar of Spanish life. And it's oppressive, it's suffocating, it's everywhere, it's inescapable.
I'm curious as to know how it got to this stage because I know, obviously, I was aware to a small degree of feminism in Ireland growing up. And I'm sure that it's been furthered a lot in Western Europe in general. But what's in Spain is, as you said, it's way above anything else. I would say it's even above what's in Sweden. It's in every nook and cranny. If you're in any city, you'll find buildings, and it'll say for for women, for migrants, for everyone except the native male. And I'm wondering how is it part of the kind of biological female in Spain that they've taken feminism and made something of it that is much more intense than any other Western country.
Well, again, like I said, the origins of this is all pretty much Judeo-American feminism. So this is coming from the various waves that came about in the United States in decades gone by. It's very, what you'd find if you were to read anything by Andrea Dworkin. It's I guess we're into like the third wave now. I forget how many waves there are, but there's nothing particularly new about Spanish feminism. It's just Judeo-American feminism in Spanish. But I think that it has become so prevalent in Spain and it's become so dominant in Spain is because it was one of the sharpest tools to subvert Spain with. What I mean to say is Spain is typically, traditionally, Spain is a very macho, that's a Spanish word. It means actually male in Spanish. In certain contexts, there's other synonyms, but macho is a word that means male. Like if you were to ask, is your dog male or female? You would say, tu perro es macho o hembra? Is it male or female? Hembra is female. So it's this typical, traditionally sort of like Mediterranean macho country, wherein men were in positions of authority. There was a patriarchy. There was a genuine, you could say a patriarchy in a good way, and it was a good thing. And during the years of the Franco dictatorship, this machismo was celebrated. It was not considered toxic. It was considered a good thing. It was celebrated, and it dovetailed with Spanish nationalism, Spanish unification, Catholic supremacy. Catholicism was a very big part of Francoism. So how do you subvert the church, nationalism, and Spanish identity and Spanish culture? Well, you have to go after the pillars of masculinity and the patriarchy. Just as in other countries, we have seen that this has been fundamental. You have to take down the men, especially the strong men, the honorable men, the men who are most likely to have a sense of duty and honor to their kin and their institutions. So you have to subvert that. And feminism is the sharpest tool with which you can. And that's why I think that feminism has just become so much more prevalent here than in a country like Sweden, even in a country like Sweden. Although that's, again, it's similar because, again, you have this Nordic country famous for its Viking heroes, its Viking history, and these warrior people. So you have to subvert that again with feminism. But I think it's gone even a bit farther in Spain because, I don't want to speak too much about Sweden. I haven't lived there, but the level at which feminism now has just it's got now into like the primary school level, the secondary school level, and just a few months ago, like a feminist activist went to a secondary school and basically like insulted teenage boys to their faces. It was actually like, I think nowadays, being such a soft society, there's no way that in today's moral lens, it could not be considered bullying. She was actually bullying the teenage boys in the audience, making fun of them for being boys, insulting them for being boys, completely bullying them. to the point where like a lot of boys actually walked out of this event that they were being forced to attend because they were just completely being insulted. And I don't know if anything like that has occurred in countries even as leftist and feminist progressive as Sweden. I've yet to see anything like that. I could be wrong, maybe something has happened like that, but I think that it's been so prevalent here in Spain because they had to subvert Spanish machismo, and not only just subvert it but actually invert it now, where, as you pointed out, the Spanish man is he's basically now he's just a worker drone, and on his back, on the backs of his labor, is supported this entire system of basically bitches and whining bitches and migrants, and he is just this despised figure now. It's really really it's quite a shame actually, and it's kind of sad to see, and I feel very bad for the young boys who are growing up in this Spain.
I was out for a jog there a few days ago in the countryside, and I passed a police car, and there were two police women. They were talking to some big burly man about something. And I was surprised that they weren't Guardia Civil because it was pretty rural, but these women were tiny, really like barely 5 foot tall, and I don't know, 45 kilos in weight. They were just tiny. And I just was, as I ran past, I was thinking, imagine if those two women got called out to something really horrendous, like, physical violence being, enacted, and they have to try and stop it, like some massive farmer or whatever. It just, I just saw this and thought, this is what happens when you pervert reality and you tell women that they're as physically strong as men and all the rest of it. I was just going to ask you as well, because as you said, Spain was very much a culture of machismo, and Franco died in early 70s, I believe.
Yeah, that's when, the
74 or 75.
yeah,
No?
it was around that time. Actually, no, I don't. Well, the '82 World Cup was in Spain in 1982, and I think Spain had just come out of Francoism and had just gone back to just established like the parliamentary monarchy, democracy type thing. So I think Franco died in '79, and then there was the shift into democracy. But yeah, somewhere around that time, late '70s. Yeah.
I'm going to check it.
Yeah,
I just want to be sure of this.
Get the fact checkers. Make
Yeah.
sure they don't ring us up.
Right. Well, he definitely, yeah, 1975.
Okay.
He lived a
yeah.
long life. He was born in 1892. So
Yeah. He had an
there you
incredible
go.
life.
So yeah, it seemed that everything was in place for when he. I think all the subversion was waiting in the wings. So before he died, they were ready. They were ready to go crazy. As soon as he died, they were ready to change the culture. And obviously,
they had already been trying. They'd already been trying. That was, even during the years prior to the Civil War. These people, these anarchists, these revolutionary types, these Judeo-American feminist types, that was already being the culture was already seeping in that. That's part of what sparked the Spanish Civil War, was the total domination of left-wing subversion and revolutionaries. So yeah, this is not a new thing. It was actually something that Franco and the Spanish right had already struggled with.
He had to make certain concessions. So, for example, with tourism in the 50s and 60s, you had the likes of Benidorm and Alicante, and it wasn't it wasn't the type of Spain Franco wanted, but at the same time, they needed to increase their income. So I saw documentaries from 60s and all that, and it was like you had the traditional Spain, but then in these resorts on the coast, it was kind of like early global homo, shall we say. So right, but yeah, it just seemed to accelerate very, very quickly as we like Spain was behind. This is why I'm so amazed how feminist Spain is, because Spain was late to the party. You
Hmm.
know, compared to the United States, compared to most countries from the Anglosphere, compared to the Western part of Germany, formerly West Germany, compared
Hmm.
to France even, Spain was way behind. And today, it's probably ahead of everyone else. With this toxic, absolutely toxic ideology.
Hmm. Oh yeah, and that's probably why it's so intensive, because they're making up for lost time, and because they have so many examples to copy and to surpass. Um, and just so people have an idea, if people who don't live in Spain, so imagine during the part of the calendar when there's lots of festivals and lots of parties and lots of good weather, and it's meant to be a time of being with your friends and celebrating. Imagine that there's propaganda posted everywhere, posters on put up on the streets, um, at bus stops, at train stations. There's huge billboards, huge signs, huge posters created by the local town council or even the national government, paid for by your tax euros, paid for by your taxes as a working man. And on the television as well, public television, the state run television, you see adverts, promos made by, again, the Spanish national government or the local regional government or the local town council. At the end of the advert, you see all of the different, the logos, all the different insignia of whether it's the Spanish royal emblem, whether it's the coat of arms of each autonomous community, etc. And during this time that's meant to be celebratory, you have propaganda of, a woman covered in bloody handprints, or um, that sort of like flat human, that sort of like Facebook style art, right? And it's uh, you know, a cartoon of a woman, shedding a tear, or something like this, because now actually it's not time to celebrate and come out and be together and have fun. No, it's time to remind everyone that men are horrible, men are killers, and behind the eyes of every man is the soul of a rapist and a murderer. And all the Spanish men are actually, yeah, they're just rapists and killers in waiting. And instead of thinking about how much fun you're going to have under the Spanish sun, uh, you know, going out with your friends and family and having a good time during like the month of Feria or anything like that. No, and now actually you need to be on the lookout for violencia machista. And as we talk about the word macho, so this is where it comes from, macho. It's machista. It's an adjective, and it's hard to translate this, but it basically means just male violence. Violencia machista, male violence. Somehow it's violence that only men commit. And another thing is violencia de género. This is another thing that's sort of difficult. Again, these are, like you were saying, that Spain is sort of surpassing France and Switzerland and the United States. Because again, these are like linguistic evolutions that might exist in Anglophone countries, etc. But it's kind of difficult to translate directly. The concept exists maybe, but like the actual having an actual term for it is maybe something that English countries can't or don't have, because violencia de género is like, it's gender violence. Violence now has a gender. There's a certain type of violence that only men commit, and only women are their victims. And they'll give examples of, you know, um, so apparently, like rape. Rape is something that only men perpetrate on women. That's just not true. We know that. Or domestic abuse is something that only men perpetrate on women. That's not true. Just ask Johnny Depp. Um, and so, there's a pushback on this from all sorts of Spaniards, whether it's the center or the right. Women included are pushing back and saying, La violencia no tiene género. Violence has no gender. Both sexes are capable of of being violent. Both sexes are um, can be victims of violence, but the Spanish government presses on like a unstoppable locomotive with this, to the point now where there are so many different laws on the books now that criminalize and penalize at a harder, kind of like hate crime, right? If you attach, like we were talking about earlier in our stream about, in Ireland, if you attach hate onto the charge, now instead of like a 1 year sentence, now you're looking at a 4 year sentence, because it's not just a crime, it's a hate crime. So in the case of Spain, like if a woman were to abuse her male husband or boyfriend, she might not even get in trouble at all. But let's say she did. She gets in trouble because she, did some act of violence or whatever. Okay, she might get a slap on the wrist, 6 months, or a fine to pay. But now when a man does it, now it's violencia de género. It's violencia de género. It's gendered violence. It's violence against women, I guess would be like the English expression. And that brings with it a much harsher penalty. And so what I'm trying to do here is just paint the picture for anyone who's not in Spain of just how prevalent this is and how ubiquitous it is and how oppressive it is. You cannot escape it. And so, for example, when I lived in Granada, which is a very, student town, very leftist, even like, there's graffiti everywhere. And Granada has some nice areas, but I actually kind of think it's a decrepit city. If anyone's ever been there, there's some lovely areas where there's a great mix of, Western and Arabic architecture. It was, ruled by the the caliphate, the Moorish caliphate that conquered for many years. But outside of those sort of preserved historic areas, the city's kind of decrepit. It's covered in graffiti, and so much of the graffiti is just feminist slogans, or even just like vulgar um, depictions of the female genitalia, because it's getting to that point now where it's just like the feminists are just celebrating their own, genitalia, just putting that in it. They'll even draw like the vagina dentata. So it's like the vagina with teeth. And they'll put that symbol everywhere, like even on like, the closed shutters of a shop. It could be like your local supermarket. When it's closed, it's, lowers the shutter and it's just covered in feminist graffiti. Not anarchist graffiti, not NWO graffiti, not like your typical, not gangland graffiti. That's feminist graffiti. The feminists have gone wild. But what's funny too is, I guess we'll have to get to this later, is how, you know, they're spray painting the vagina and everything like that. Well, now the feminists are getting in trouble because the transgender ideology has arrived as well, and now the feminists are in a bit of a well, what would you say? They're between a rock and a hard place, right? I don't know. The transgenderism has really put them in a bind, because now you can be a man now and be a woman too. So they don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's thrown a spanner into the works. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that, because last year I visited a city in Andalusia, and there was a mural, and I'm guessing this mural was relatively recent. Maybe it was done in the last 2 years, and it was massive. It went on for about, I don't know, 50 or 60 meters, and it was all different women in different jobs, and it was more or less saying, glory to feminism, and yes, we can do it too. And you'd have a woman as a doctor, a woman as a scientist, in a laboratory. You'd have a woman as a carpenter. You'd have a woman as a police woman, and so on and so forth. And when I saw it, I just grinned when I saw it, because I was thinking, this is already out of date, because there are no women here in this mural with massive flowing beards.
Right.
So, as you said, like this has really crept up on the feminists. They have more or less, they have all the power, and now there's another group that wants in on that power. And I believe there are many feminists that don't want to give up the power that they've acquired in the last number of decades, especially these older ones, these old feminists.
Right, the old school.
Yeah, yeah. I should say as well, you mentioned violencia de género. A few years ago, someone from Vox, he came out and said, violence is violence. Violence has no gender. I thought that was very smart. Violence has no gender. But yeah, it didn't really wash. They're still holding on to this violencia de género. And I was curious to know, did they originally use violencia doméstica, like what we have, domestic violence? And they did have it, actually. They used to use that. But at some stage, I believe it changed to violencia de género, which
Mm.
obviously has more of a modern connotation, because the idea is that the woman she's no longer in the home. She's no longer dependent on the man. But still, it's about a man attacking a woman. Also, a few years ago, I saw on TV. So they used to, all these buzzwords, all this toxin. It comes from the US.
Hmm.
Let's be honest, and because we're both, fluent in English, we're both mother tongue English speakers. It doesn't have to be translated for us. And originally in Spanish, they would translate it. They translate it to something similar to English. But now they no longer translate it. You could create a buzzword in the morning in America, and by evening time, on the news in Spain, they'll be saying el manspreading, el
Hmm.
manspreading.
Hmm. Yeah.
so so
Yep.
and
This was actually
obviously,
this was done in was it Barcelona, in the Barcelona metro, that they had the man spreading, just as if they had just completely copied some Scandinavian country or the United States or Australia, any of the woke Anglosphere countries. They just immediately copied it, like within a matter of months of it becoming a trending topic in the Anglosphere. There was Spain copying, man spreading, putting up the signs again, city council putting up the signs, the ayuntamiento putting up these signs of the image of the man with his legs spread out too wide on the seat of the metro, and how that's man spreading, and there's going to be, we got to put a stop to that. So yeah, it's incredible how this, and going back to the whole how the trannies are putting a spanner in the works. Like, now there's the expression turf feminist, the trans exclusive radical feminists. That's now an identity that Spanish feminists are um, embracing, and it's obviously an English acronym, this turf thing. But now, because of the rapid incursion into feminist politics, uh, they have to seek refuge in another concept that wasn't of their making. It wasn't a concept of the Spanish culture, of the Spanish mind. It's another, Anglicism. Well, it's Judeo-Anglicism, and they have to cling on to it because it's their only defense. They've, like I said, they go around spray painting female genitalia. Well, now, women can have penises, so that's not the correct, politically correct thing to do now. So the lines are being drawn even here, and I actually just laugh at it. I don't have much sympathy now. I think obviously it's I imagine it's obviously cultural subversion and degeneracy, but I don't actually care now that uh, a swimmer who identifies as a female is BTFOing all of the female swimmers. I don't care. You've made your bed, and all the feminists and all the women and all the progressives who support this, you made your bed. Now it's time to lie in it. Um, but it is interesting to see how funny alliances are coming out, and there's probably now a bunch of uh, you know turf feminists who are going to have to side with some right wing chicas, because yeah, they're basically being told that being a woman now is a meaningless identity that anyone can have, and all of the years of struggle, quote unquote, that Spanish women have gone through mean nothing, because here comes a guy in a beard who identifies as a woman, and now he's just one of the ladies too, and here he is in your dressing room, in your bathroom, in your sports leagues, etc. And if you complain about it, now you're a transphobe and you are outside of the cathedral. So it's very interesting to see how that's happening in Spain as well.
they're getting into factions, and they're making strange bedfellows indeed. I just want to say, yeah, Tulthor asks me if I speak Spanish. I do. And Spindley says, do they know about the J.K. Rowling issue in Spain?
Yeah, they do. It's it's known because like Harry Potter is obviously universally popular, so it's known what's happened. Yeah, like the Spanish media has reported on it. You can, whenever there's big news, I follow lots of Spanish sources of information, but they tend to lean in my to the extent that they exist on social media platforms, they lean in my direction. I don't follow like mainstream Spanish publications, but they will highlight these things because they're examples of like the wokeism. Woke is another term, like el woke. you know La política woke is another thing that has come into the Spanish language, as it has, I'm sure, in Italy and in France, etc. So yeah, like whenever there's another example of um you know Anglosphere wokeism, just another absurdity, whether it's coming from the United States or England or whatever, definitely, yeah, there are some Spaniards who are paying attention to it, and then even the Spanish mainstream will also like prick up its ears because J.K. Rowling is obviously a hugely influential and famous figure. So yeah, Spain is aware of it.
Okay, okay. I was going to say that the fact that English is a much more concise language than Italian or Spanish and German, for example, I can understand, because we have words, generally they have less syllables than Italian words. And I heard a few years back that in Italian, and you'll know this, whether it's true or not, that they were saying il weekend because weekend in
Mm-hmm.
Italian is even, I think it's even longer than in Spanish.
Fine de settimana.
Okay, yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It is. Right. It's an
yeah.
extra syllable. Yeah. So it just became easier for them to say il weekend.
Oh yeah, this is, well, not to get off into a wormhole here, but Italy is pathetic when it comes to how they bastardize their own language, or how they spurn their own language. It's sort of like that meme of the guy who's looking behind him at the other girl while his girlfriend is looking at him like, "Hey, I'm over here. What are you doing looking at that other girl?" Italy does that with the English language and its own language. So they have this great, rich linguistic history. It's one of the most beautiful and influential languages ever, and yet they are enamored with English for some reason, to the point where politicians will have political slogans in English. um, Football teams will have slogans written on their kits in English. And then even talking about football, the football vocabulary is now changing. There are football terms in Italian that Italians have used for, since football became an Italian sport, a sport played in Italy, but now they're all changing. So instead of like saying fuori gioco, which is offside, the commentators during a match will say like il offside, è stato offside. It's like, why are you saying that word? We have an Italian expression, we have an Italian term for it, and why are you using the English one? And it's just so grating to hear. But that's been a problem that has long plagued Italy. France is one of the few countries I'm aware of that actually tries to do something about it, and the long defeat of trying to keep their language free of these Englishisms, or actually more accurately, these Americanisms, is France. Actually, they will occasionally like have like the Royal Academy of French or whatever, the Académie Française, will like try and put up a fight and say that these words should not be taught, and they should be excised from dictionaries, not be included in the dictionaries, not be taught in schools, not be put on. I think they even tried to do something a few decades ago, like um, one out of every 3 songs played on the radio at least had to be in French, because now in Europe, in countries all over Europe, it's just American pop songs, one after another after another. You can listen to Spanish or Italian radio all day, and you won't hear a single song in Spanish or Italian. Well, maybe in Spain, not so much. You'll hear Latin American reggaeton, but I mean, that's just basically monosyllabic caveman repetitions for 3 minutes, so it's not even music.
There is a radio station called Cadena Dial, and all of their music is in Spanish.
Yeah.
So if you're ever tired of listening to stuff in English, I recommend it. So I was going to say as well, yeah, you're right about the French, the long defeat. Yeah, like they are putting up some resistance. And I know, for example, a few years ago, I was in France. I had to buy a train ticket, and I did French in secondary school, but I don't really remember any of it. and I was trying to buy it in English, and I was trying to use some Spanish words, but the woman there, she was probably in her 60s. She wouldn't sell me the ticket until I asked for it in Pigeon French, and eventually I got my
Mm.
ticket. I eventually got it, but
That's
I,
strange because most of the time the French just can't even be bothered. Like they don't want to waste their time listening to you try and use their language. They're just like, yeah, yeah, we get it. You're trying to, be cool and use French, but just get it over with and tell me what you want. They're not impressed.
she was adamant that if I wanted my ticket, I had to at least make an effort, and I was like,
That's kind of cute, actually. That's kind of
je
charming.
je voudrais je voudrais un billet. I didn't know what it was. It was in French. And I was like,
Yeah.
ticket, make ticket sound French, ticket. So, all right. I was going to say that, yeah, you remember there, we probably spoke about it in a previous conversation, that when that young teacher was killed in Ireland, for a number of days, the government and the media were saying that they were kind of floating the idea that men should be locked up, at a certain time
Mhm.
every evening, 2 hours or something, so women would be safe. And when I heard that, I was thinking, right, obviously I'm not living in Ireland, but I keep in touch with people there, and I was there 2 years ago, and I was thinking, nah, that's not going to fly, not yet anyway. Ireland would need more time. But I was thinking, if there's one country in the world where they could probably bring that, into reality tomorrow, it would be Spain.
Mhm.
So
Oh yeah.
I was going to say too that I notice in some cities in Spain, you have these pink benches. So you'll have them in plazas, you'll have them on various streets, and they'll have a kind of they'll have a sort of how would I put this? A kind of a line of poetry or something, and then at the bottom of it, it'll say, "This bench is in memory of all the women uh, who were killed and beaten up by gender violence."
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
was thinking that's like putting a fucking tombstone, all over your city, putting a tombstone,
It's
and more or less
macabre.
pointing the
Yeah.
finger at half of the population. You know what I mean?
Oh, this is incredible. Like even in my small town, they do this, and I don't. It's again like either they're stealing the money from Germany, or the money's coming from God knows where, because Spain isn't rolling in cash here, so it's coming from taxpayers. It's coming from richer European countries, and this is what Spain is using it for. It's disgusting. But even in my small town, there's a monument to the victims of violencia machista every 8th of March, which is supposedly International Women's Day. But here in Spain, it's international take to the streets and bitch and do another, bloody protest, blocking traffic, screaming, spray painting graffiti, all this kind of stuff. Um, it's not a celebration of women at all. It's an angry misandrist day of female uh bitterness and rage, and it's just unstoppable. One of the great controversies of recent Spanish life was just before the scamdemic came. um and it's so funny because whether or not you believe it was real or whatever, but the fact remains that people who believed it was real and people who would later incriminate anyone who went out to see their friends or didn't wear a mask, god forbid, those same people in the on the 8th of March 2020, so this would be as we came into the new year in 2020, so during like the last months of 2019 was when we started seeing the stuff happening in China. Oh my god, what's going on there? People are collapsing, but anyway, so then we come into January 2020, February 2020. It starts coming to Europe. Okay, it's in Italy. It's getting a bit eerie, a bit concerning here. So now we come into the first weeks of March, and it's looking like, yep, this is going to be serious. We're going to have to take some serious action here. There's a viral pandemic now, but despite all the warnings, despite all of the actions being taken, and despite all of the concern, the 8th of March, huge feminist gatherings were allowed to take place, as they do every year. It doesn't matter, and they get everything they want. They have everything they want. There's literally nothing, and people have done this. They, male rights people, conservatives, YouTubers, people who are, have the balls to actually engage with these people and show them to be the hypocrites that they are. We'll go to these events, these marches, and actually ask like, what is it that you don't have? What is it that tell me, what is one right that men have that you don't have as a woman? Or tell me, what is one thing that you're still lacking? And they can't answer. They're shown up to be completely hypocritical, and they're just whining, materialistic, and power hungry. And they're all led by the left wing of Podemos or the Spanish Socialist Party of PSOE. And so they went out and had these huge feminist International Women's Day marches. And of course, they were a cause of contagion, I guess, if you believe that narrative. But of course, they didn't apologize for it. Or they didn't recognize that could have played a role. And of course, any other type of gathering was then criminalized or frowned upon or not even allowed to take place. So anti-lockdown protests were not allowed, but a feminist protest was fine in the eyes of these people. And so like it is everywhere. There's monuments to it, there's flags, there's banners, and they're put up constantly. And there's even like it's like I've seen a ticker like on the bottom scrolling news ticker of like counting the cases of violencia machista, with a total disregard for the cases where men are victims of domestic violence. I actually looked into this one of my first years that I was living in Spain because I was just so intrigued by this obsession with violencia machista and this clear demonization of men, like this clear attempt to drive a wedge between men and women in Spain. And so I looked at the numbers, and I think it was the year of 2016 that I did this. And in a calendar year, I think like 54 men had killed their wives or something, which is another thing that these feminists are loath to argue and admit, which is that this violencia de género, violencia machista, it has nothing to do at all with just random hatred towards women and random killings of women for being women. Every single occasion, every single case of this violence is always a man killing his ex-wife who's done him dirty in a divorce or has taken his kids. It's usually the case that the man ends up turning the weapon on himself and taking his own life too. So it's clearly not just about, I want to kill women. No, these are usually women who have hurt them, have done something to them, or it's men who are completely desperate and they take their own lives too. They often take the lives of their children. These are horrible, horrible things that are a reflection of a society in severe stages of decay and dysfunction. But the discourse has been completely taken over by these harpies, so that the only angle that is being looked at is the one which demonizes men as just random killers of women for being women. So it's total bullshit. But in any case, the figure of women who killed their husbands was like 39. So we had 54 female victims of domestic violence and 39 victims of male victims of domestic violence, like death, being killed by their spouse. That's not a big difference. But no one cares. There's not a single mention of men getting killed by their wives. Whereas if a guy in Madrid just pushes his wife, just shouts at his wife, that will make national news. It will make national news. And then let's get on to the other grand hypocrisy. All these monuments, all these pink benches, purple flags, statues, streets being named, calle no a la violencia de género. It's crazy. And yet, if the killer of a woman, or if the rapist of a woman is from the Maghreb, from Africa, from the Middle East. Oh, suddenly that doesn't make the news. Suddenly the face of those killers, the faces of those killers, the faces of those rapists aren't plastered everywhere on the television, on social media. Suddenly it's just a silhouette. Rapist on the loose, rapist. Suddenly it's just un hombre, a man, killed a woman in Malaga or in Madrid. Oh, interesting. No description of his ethnicity. No picture of him. It's all very hush hush. There have been horrible cases of Spanish women victimized by Africans, by Arabs, and nobody cares. Not the feminists. Only Vox cares. Only this sort of kosher civic nationalist party that kind of puffs its chest out and talks a big game but doesn't actually deliver. Horrible cases. There have been even not just Spanish women victimized, holidaymakers from other countries. There was a case of I think it was a British woman who was gang raped in Andalusia, and no one cares. Not the feminists themselves. No one cares. These names don't make the news. But the second a Spaniard, a Spanish man, shouts at his wife, pushes his wife, or or in the case of like La Manada, I'm sure we'll talk about that, when the perpetrators are Spaniards, their faces are published everywhere, their names are published everywhere. It's a national tragedy, it's national news, and it's indicative of some rot in Spanish society. It's indicative of a epidemic of violencia machista, male violence. These Spanish men are just horrible, evil, women-hating killers and rapists. And yet, if you look at the demographic makeup of who is actually committing most of these sexual and violent crimes, it's not Spanish men at all, as is the case in almost every European country. It's the same story over and over again. Who's committing the vast majority of these violent crimes? Who's committing the vast majority of acts of terrorism, etc., etc.? It's our new guests. But the hypocritical left and these hypocritical feminists have nothing to say. And it is enraging. It is disgusting. And it is a subversion. It's a tool of subversion because it has torn Spanish society apart to the point where it has now got that I would not begrudge any Spanish young man for going completely MGTOW and not wanting nothing to do with Spanish women and actually being afraid to flirt, to ask for a phone number, to even like go out and have drinks with a woman. There was a case not too long ago, just days ago, of some Spanish YouTuber, some Spanish live streamer who, in a stream of conscious conversation with his followers, told a funny story about how one of his guy friends, his strategy when he goes out, and tries to talk to girls and whatever, is just to wait until they've had enough to drink so that they don't notice how ugly he is or how awkward he is. And that's something that we can all relate to. That, yeah, sometimes it's better to just, go for the ones who've already had a few to drink, and they might be, they might have the beer goggles on. We have terms like this. But now, in current year Spain, that's actually a form of rape culture. That's a form of violencia machista. That's another indication. That's another sign of just how evil and predatory Spanish men are. Not the Africans committing gang rapes and holding knives to the throats of poor little Spanish women as they gang rape them. No. That nobody cares about that. But a live streamer, a YouTuber, talking about how his friend at the club, just talks to the drunk girls. That's horrible. That we need to address. It's unbelievable, and it's disgusting.
Getting back to, this idea that all Spanish men are kind of Neanderthals, and they just grab a woman and walk off with her, this type of thing with the woman over their shoulder. Like, because I've heard this from Spanish women, they complain a lot about Spanish men, and they say that Spanish men are so machista, and they're so aggressive. I just don't see it. Like, I've met so
Yeah.
many Spanish men over the years from different parts of Spain. I find them quite metrosexual in a way that they like to dress nice. Um, they're generally very calm. They like to joke a little bit, but generally very level-headed guys. I haven't actually compared to other countries. I would say in Ireland we have probably, per capita, we've probably, and although a lot of people complain about Irish men of today, that they've no cojones and all this. If you compare Spanish men to Irish men, I would say Irish men have a little bit more testosterone going on. But
Hmm.
the way Spanish women speak of Spanish men, you'd swear they were like, I don't know, just like baboons or something. It's horrendous. And
I've been flabbergasted about how many things are labeled machista. It's incredible. Like, I if we were having this conversation a few years ago, I would have had many more examples fresh in mind. And over the past few days when we were talking about having this conversation, planning this conversation, I've been trying to remember some of them. But it's just like it's impossible to remember all of them. It's uncountable. It's innumerable. How many times, as I was ingratiating myself into Spain and Spanish culture and getting to know Spaniards and et cetera, and people who didn't quite know me yet and didn't know that I was a dangerous, far right extremist, evil, racist, and woman hater. So they were talking freely to me. And they thought I was, one of them, one of just, I was a citizen of global homo and believed everything that they did. So they would speak openly about, oh, how machista this is, or it could be a film, it could be a joke, it could be anything, it could be it's amazing how many things are considered machista. Anything can be considered machista. It's just it's hilarious, kind of, in a way. Like, it's everything. The color of your shirt, but the color of the shirt that you bought for your girlfriend, thinking that she would like this color because she's a girl. Oh, that's a. Oh, and by the way, talking about things that have come from the English language into Spain, I'm sure you've heard. Have you heard the term micromachismo? Micromachismo. It's like microaggressions.
I haven't,
And
but I understood it.
yeah, okay. So just as the in the Anglosphere we had the the concept of the microaggression, in Spain, it's it's been modified to fit the huge the matriarchy. It's been modified to fit the agenda of the feminist dictatorship that is Spain, and so it's not called microagresión. They're called micromachismo, micro, I guess, chauvinism, male chauvinisms, and it could be anything from saying "hola guapa" to a girl and saying, "qué tal tío" to a man. So you've said, like, "hello pretty" to the girl, which I think this is one of the things I love about Spain, is how everyone is always just like, "hey guapa, hey
I
guapo."
I always say "hola guapa"
Yeah, it's
to
fine.
a
It's
girl. Always.
nice. Yeah, hey guapa. It's like, it makes you feel kind of, yeah, I'm pretty. I'm pretty. And and they'll call to you, "hey, hola guapo" if you're a boy. Hey, it's very cultural. But now the insidious subversives have taken this innocent phrase, which is probably goes back decades, if not centuries, of saying "hola guapo, hola guapa," which just means like "hello pretty, hello handsome." So, but now it's a micromachismo if you say "hola guapa" to a girl. It's just it's crazy. It's a fucking compliment.
I know, I know. I've seen that. If you go to the Mercado Central, where they have all the fruit and they have the fish, and like I see you've got these men in their 40s, in their 50s, selling meat and selling fish, and they even say "hola guapa" to the old women, and the old women are
Yeah,
delighted. They're
yeah.
delighted.
It's just crazy, and it's such a shame too. And like, talking about how it's so, how, like, you don't see, like you said, I don't get it. Where are they getting all these complaints from? Spanish men aren't this macho, and it's going back to that subversion. The reaction, because this whole thing is about feminism. It's not about empowering women. It's about demonizing and weakening men. And so the male reaction has been, to completely effeminize and sort of buffer the rough edges of male behavior and the male spirit, to a point now where, and I actually lament this all the time, like, I don't have really great male friends in Spain. because they're all gay. But not actually in a homosexual way. They're
Yeah,
just
metrosexuals, metrosexuals.
not even metrosexual. They don't care about their appearances. They're not like David Beckham, shaving their armpits and having such great care for their not a single hair out of place. No, they don't. They're kind of slobs. But what I mean is that they're just gay. Like they are not interested in sport, in fitness. In the most masculine thing they can think of doing is drinking lots of beer, which is actually a psyop. It's not that masculine of a thing to do, and the beer nowadays is full of endocrine disruptors and gives you higher estrogen. So it's a poisonous drink. But like there's nothing really masculine about these men. They Their interests are feminine. Their behavior is feminine. Um, the way they would prefer to spend their time is feminine. And I have had a real dearth of like male friends with whom I could go to the gym, uh, you know, uh, practice martial arts, things like that. Like a lot of my guy friends were just happy to shoot the shit and drink beer, but not in a like in the Anglo sense of like and talk about the game. Not even that. None of my male friends were interested in sport. It's just really strange. So the men here have been so um, domesticated and feminized, but that's not even the most accurate word. They've been um, they've been made anodyne. They've been sanitized to a point now where there's nothing particularly masculine about them. And it's really really kind of eerie. And yet they are still complaining. These feminist types are still complaining that we live in this oppressive patriarchy and there's all this machismo everywhere. If only. Instead, what we've got is a country that is a feminist dictatorship and a matriarchy, and it's just awash in weakness and sort of weaponized compassion, extreme compassion. That, like Jordan Peterson talked about this, how the feminist tendency towards compassion can actually become a horribly damaging behavioral trait. It's like too much of it ends up tearing your civilization apart, and that's clearly happening here in Spain.
Emma has left a comment. By the way, fertility rate 2021 1.19. Yeah, we'll get into that towards the end. I will say the way the way Spanish women speak of Spanish men, it reminds me of someone saying to you, "I'm going to show you a really ferocious animal," and they bring you over, and you've got this massive blanket over a kind of cage, and they pull back the blanket, and it's just a rabbit hutch with a white, pet rabbit in there, nibbling away on a bit of carrot, and then they say,
"Beware
of
dog," and it's a little,
step
it's a little chihuahua.
Step back, that rabbit will tear you to shreds, So it just doesn't stack up what they tell you and what you see in Spain. And as you say, they've kind of been lobotomized, a lot of the Spanish men. It's pretty sad to see, it's pretty sad. So I'll just mention that a few years ago, I was looking up stats on infanticide, and in the United States anyway, it turned out that, because I was expecting, okay, fair enough, generally mothers will spend more time with the kids than fathers in general, and generally mothers will have custody of the kids if the parents aren't living together. So fair enough, but I still was expecting to see something like 75% of the murders committed by men, but no, the majority. Now, it wasn't a massive majority. It was like something like 55% compared to 45%, but still the majority of infanticide was committed by the biological mothers and not the biological fathers. So
what do you call that? What do you call that? Violencia de madre? Like, what are you going to call that? They don't care. They don't care.
It doesn't fit the agenda, It doesn't fit the agenda.
It is such an agenda.
Violence comes from all angles,
I've always said this again, going back to like my capricious red pilling on at a very early age. Um, and I've always sort of said this. And I remember I told this once to one of my Irish friends from Wexford. We were just sort of like talking about innocent things, and then we were talking about relationships and stuff. And I told him my theory that I've had for many years, and he's like, "God damn it, man, that is the most black pilling, depressing thing I've ever heard." But I've always believed men kill their wives, women kill their kids. And we do that because we kill the thing that has most disappointed us. We kill the thing that we thought would be our saving grace. We kill the thing that we thought would give meaning and joy to our lives and fulfillment. And men seek that in women, and women seek that in children. Traditionally, obviously nowadays women are so fucked up that they think they don't even want kids. But traditionally, women have wanted to be mothers, and men have wanted to I was going to use the Spanish word conquistar, impress women and get girls, right? And then men get married, and they think they've married their dream girl, and it turns out actually this isn't so good. It's not as good as I thought. It's actually living hell. And then women have children, and they get the same sort of disappointment and depression, and this isn't as good as I thought. And then something breaks in the brain, and they commit these horrible acts, and men will kill their wives and women will kill their kids. So I'm not surprised by those percentages, but it is just, again, nobody talks about it though. Nobody cares.
It should be mentioned as well that when women murder, they usually do so by poisoning the victim. So a lot of that goes undetected. It goes undetected. There's a cremation for the husband within 24 hours, and that's the end of it. So I should say
it's
as well
interesting
that
to talk about infanticide. Like not too long ago, there was a case of a Spanish man. So of course it made national news. It was horrible. Oh my gosh, no one could shut up about it for days. Twitter hashtags, everyone on Instagram sharing the same images and story of a Spanish man who kidnapped his own children. I guess he was going through a divorce and a custody battle, took the children and killed them. And I think he drowned them at sea or something. A horrible crime. But it was painted as, again, violencia de género, even though one of the children, I think, was a boy. It is painted again as male violence against women, even though the wife wasn't the victim, it was the children. And it was, again, depicted as violencia de género, violencia machista. And if those percentages that you've just said, they are true, I know you said you check the data. It's just crazy to think then how many cases of women have been going around killing their children, and they don't even make local news. Like they don't even nobody cares, nobody knows. Whereas one guy kills his kids and it's a national scandal, and we have to have this period of reflection, and politicians are out making speeches. Twitter is alight with hashtags of, violencia machista. And yet it's the majority of these infanticide cases are committed by women. That's unreal.
Do you remember the case? It's about 3 or 4 years ago of Ana Julia Quesada in Almeria.
Was she the one that was killed by the babysitter?
No, she killed her boyfriend's little boy. But this went on for months beforehand. There was, the boy went missing. Well, it went on for weeks. The boy went missing.
Was he the one that was found in a well?
Yes. Yeah.
He was. I'm sorry, not the babysitter. He was killed by the
stepmother to be. The stepmother to be.
Yeah, who was black, who was African.
She was from the Dominican Republic. So this was a very interesting story because there was so much speculation, there was so much hearsay, and some people were saying, "Oh, I'd say the father did it," and then someone else would say, "I'd say the mother did it," because they're separated now and he has a new girlfriend, and all. There's all this hearsay, and this they were all over the news all the time. There were interviews with them, and they were saying, "We just want to find." What was the nickname they have from Pescadito, like little fish, because he liked fish. Yeah. He liked going to the aquarium and he liked the sea. Pescadito. We're just searching for Pescadito, and eventually, anyway, she was the one who was constantly in front of the camera, constantly speaking, saying, "Oh, the morning he left, I offered him an apple, and he was just going to visit his friend, and I don't know." And obviously, she was the one, but she went to move the body. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
The police followed her there to this rural place, and she put the body into the boot of her car. And someone phoned her, a journalist, while she was in the car driving. And the way she was speaking to him, you'd swear that she just had her groceries in the boot.
Yeah.
She was
Hmm.
calm as hell. And then she said, "Oh, there's a police checkpoint above," but she wasn't really fretting over this. She was like, "Oh, there's a and obviously it was for her to get her out of the car and then to open the boot. But this was a story that, as soon as it was discovered that she was the murderer, it kind of disappeared.
Exactly.
Because one, she was a person of color, and two, she was a woman.
The only real details that I remember of that was just how, when it was revealed who the real killer was, how the Podemitas, Pablo Iglesias, all those types suddenly were scurrying to make sure that, oh, but let's not demonize women, and let's certainly not demonize the immigrant community for the actions of this clearly troubled woman, right? They're always, oh, they're so troubled. Whenever a woman cheats, whenever a woman kills, whenever a woman does these terrible things, there's always an excuse, some psychological ailment, some need that wasn't being met, etc., etc. Whereas whenever a man does these things, whenever a man cheats on his wife, whenever a man commits these acts of violence, he's clearly a scumbag, evil, curse, blight on society, and also a reflection of all men. So all men are indicted by the actions of this bad man. I find this hypocrisy intolerable, and it's been like this has been an ever present um, um, I was going to say like feature of life in the 21st century, and even since I was a child, I've noticed this stuff. It's got worse, not any better. Um, and so yeah, but I remember like I tend not to care about these cases. I think it's kind of very macabre and distasteful when there's this national attention given to what's clearly a matter that is not of national importance, like the murder of a child in a region, that isn't even where I live, etc. I think it's like it's better. It's one of the grimmest forms of bread and circuses. You know, to shine such a burning spotlight on the pain and suffering of a family going through something like that, when it's a matter that is actually of no importance to anyone else, unless the killer's on the loose in your area. Okay, but like these things, if it bleeds, it leads type sort of thing. But I remember, yeah, like once the identity of the killer was pretty much resolved, oh, poof, no longer, people are no longer talking about it as much. Because the killer was inconvenient to the narrative.
Yeah, but the interesting part about that story was that the woman who killed the little boy, she had moved to Spain, I don't know, 10 or 15 years beforehand, and she had a child back then, and her child had supposedly, allegedly, fallen from the balcony way up, like 8th floor, and died. And I'm not saying it could have been an accident, but it's just when, many years later, this woman kills a child. Then you have to say, there's a question mark there. Did she kill her? What was the little boy she killed in Almeria? Was that really the first child she killed? Questions
Hmm.
will start to arise, and then you see this person has a very checkered past, and it seems very dodgy. But yeah, as you said, it just disappeared, and it was
Oh, I
like,
think.
let's move on. And you said as well, it was more or less like a soap opera for a number of weeks. They were going out. There was like a media circus following them through this scrubland, looking for the kid, and it went on and on and on. And then once they found the killer, um, yeah, that was it.
Well, I would to be, we can't, obviously, confirm, what this woman might have done in her past and what might have been the real circumstances of her other child's death. But just in general, I have no hesitation to say that the world is breaking under the weight of female mistreatment of the rest of the members of society. The world is whether it's particularly in the West, where female behavior is just given carte blanche. But our society is buckling under the weight of female misbehavior and female delinquency and actual, like, almost even like female villainy, because it all gets ignored. But let's think about this factually, and there's plenty of hard data to show this as well, that actually most domestic violence is committed by women, but it's not of the level that gets to become criminal. But domestic abuse, petty arguments, petty fights, I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen women. We all know this. I'm sure we've all seen the videos of the experiments done where, some actors are hired to do an experiment in the streets. The woman can shout at her boyfriend, or the actor that's playing her boyfriend, right? Can insult him, can belittle him, can make fun of him, emasculate him in public in front of many, many, many people, and no one cares. People even laugh. You can see them, the camera catches them laughing or shrugging their shoulders, or, at least it's not me. At least my old lady's not like that. Or maybe who hasn't been there, fellas, right? Getting your ear chewed off by your nagging wife or girlfriend. And then they can escalate to the point where the woman even is now striking him, and still no one cares. No one cares. But then the second the roles are reversed, and it's the male actor who's even just sort of getting aggressive with his body language, suddenly, here comes in some white knight. Hey, everything okay over there? Or here come some harpies to protect their sister. It's ridiculous. Think about how many children are raised by single moms. I think something that, like, almost every school shooter in the United States has in common is that they were raised without a father. They were raised by a single mother. The vast majority of daycare workers are women. So all of these children that get traumatized in daycares, their trauma is at the hands of these female daycare workers. Like, almost all of childcare is in the hands of women, and rightfully so. But now, if you're going to look at the delinquent behavior of these children, well, maybe it's because there's like complete lack of fathers or father figures or men in their lives. In many cases, because the fathers have been excluded, forcibly, legally excluded. And then, like a lot of these cases of domestic violence, it's actually women are more likely to be the first to engage in domestic violence. But it's because when a woman strikes a man, he's not going to report it as a crime. It's not going to make, much of a dent. It's not going to be that damaging to him. She might cut his cheek with her fingernail. Okay. He'll just make up a story about it at work and say, it was, the cat jumped on my face or whatever. Okay. What happens then, though, is that the woman keeps escalating. And then when the man strikes back, well, now she's got a black eye and was knocked unconscious because, the male punch is that much stronger than the female punch. And then, of course, there's all these different institutions and agencies and centers where the woman can go and seek shelter, refuge, and report a crime. And because we've already spoken about how the legal system now in Spain is designed to demonize men and designed to penalize men with harsher punishments, that system comes down on men like a ton of bricks. And there's also incentive for women to do this as well. There is incentive for women to report these crimes as violencia machista. They get something out of it. They can get handsomely rewarded for it. Just as we see in divorce all throughout the West, that divorce is a lucrative business for women to be in, and their lawyers. And so, the situation is pretty bleak. It's one of those things where people ask for solutions and make sure that you're not just complaining and, well, what's your solution then? In some cases, there isn't much of a solution.
The solution is societal collapse. We just have to wait for it. It will happen eventually. All cultures do eventually collapse. And I should mention, you've kind of alluded to it. The whole idea of rape, like a woman, let's say you're dating a woman and you go on a few dates, maybe you sleep together, but you realize that she's not the one for you, or she has certain behavioral traits that you don't really like, and you decide to break it off with her, and she doesn't take too kindly to rejection, and therefore she goes to the police and accuses you of rape. Now, if it goes through the lengthy process of that you did this and all the rest of it, and let's say they discover she accuses you of having raped her at a certain place at a certain time, and you eventually have an alibi. You can actually prove that you were somewhere else, and her story falls like a house of cards. There are no repercussions for her at all.
Mm-hmm.
She
Mm-hmm.
continues in her job. She continues living her life, but you're screwed, even though you didn't do anything wrong. So this is a horrible, very lopsided legal system. And it should be mentioned as well that there is such a thing as rape fantasy. And I was surprised to find out, and I spoke to women about it, that a lot of women have this rape fantasy thing as well.
Oh yeah,
It's
I think
something that
it's like 1 in
it shouldn't be
5.
overlooked. Yeah, it shouldn't be overlooked, in any sort of legal case.
But
They should
that's the
find out if
word.
the
That's the word, overlooked. It's like male behavior is under a fucking microscope right now, and especially in a matriarchy and a feminist dictatorship like Spain. And female behavior is basically, it's only analyzed to the extent that it's useful for, like, appealing to the female audience, for telenovelas or Netflix series, or it's only analyzed to the extent of, like, how can we explore female oppression, and how can we explore the strong independent woman who don't need no man, that sort of thing. But the dark side of female behavior is completely, as you said, overlooked. Um, and also, like we're talking about with the micromachismos and all that kind of stuff, every little thing that men do gets analyzed and criminalized and demonized, to the point where, like, a guy who just feels more comfortable flirting with the girls who've already had, a few pints, is now basically a crime, and indicative of, like, the sort of, like you're saying, the predatory Neanderthal nature of all men. Whereas, I've had women shove their hand down my trousers and touch my meat and veg in on in a bar or in a club, completely unasked for. I wasn't flirting with this girl. I wasn't showing any interest of any sort of sexual nature, or hey, let's take this somewhere else. But because she's had one too many, or because she knows that she can do whatever the fuck she wants and there will be no repercussions, well, she just decides, hey, this guy's cute, I'm going to shove my hand down his trousers. And it's like, and then, as a man, what are you supposed to do? Like, I'm not going to report this as I suppose I could report as a crime, but, like, really?
Pox, you'd be laughed out of the police station.
Exactly. Like, hey, they'd be saying, what are you complaining about? And it's, how long it's been since my wife touched me? Exactly. Exactly. But even then, like, it's difficult for me to even wrap my head around of, like, what, like, I wouldn't even bother. Like, okay, that thing happened. All right. I feel a bit violated, but get over it. And I just sort of, looked at him like, what are you doing? you know? But then to make a bigger thing of it, like, there's no point. And also, I just don't, I don't know, I guess because I'm a guy, I don't care as much. But now if that was the other way around, that would be like, the woman would be in tears, and crocodile tears or otherwise, and my life would be ruined. Or other examples of total hypocrisy. I remember one time we were coming back. I was with a group of friends in Spain, and we were coming back from a cata de vino. It's like a wine festival, a celebration of wine. Where I live in Spain, wine is like a staple here. And we were on a coach coming back from the big city where this wine tasting thing was held, back to our small town in the countryside. So there was a coach that was transporting people, and everyone had a bit to drink. Okay, and it was late at night, so it's that deadly time where people are tired and also a bit drunk, so anything can happen. And it was a large group of people that I was with. Many of them weren't actually my good friends or anything. They were more like acquaintances. And the lads in the group, all of whom are beta men, mostly leftist. If any of them were right wing at all, they would be like center, very center right. But they started singing a song about in which a woman is objectified in the lyrics of the song, which is a really grand hypocrisy of so many women nowadays, is that they all love reggaeton and they all love Bad Bunny and who else is a famous reggaeton singer? I don't know. But they all love these songs, and every single reggaeton song is objectifying women. In every single reggaeton music video, you've got the video whores in the background dancing, and yet women love this stuff. Even feminist women, especially feminist women, love this stuff. Probably going back to like the whole rape fantasy and all that kind of thing, and they just want to be dominated by alpha men, really. Anyway, they sing this song, and then some feminist broad on the coach gets offended and starts like shouting at the lads as how that's machismo, sois machistas, you guys are a bunch of male chauvinist pigs, Neanderthals, horrible. And the lads are all like, what do you mean, we're just singing a song, relax. And this argument escalates, and then one of the girls' friends jumps in on it, and there's all this sort of like shouting back and forth, and the guys are kind of just like laughing it off, trying to de-escalate the situation, until we get to the bus station in our small town, and we get off the coach. And the girl, the first feminist who had to open her gob and make a scene about just some lads singing a song, still is going at it. And the great irony is one of the guys in this group is like total left wing, total progressive. He's the kind of person who would like watch a series and complain about how one of the main characters is committing all these micromachismos. He's that kind of beta male cuck. And yet here he was enjoying the fruits of his ideology right in the face, as this feminist girl is screaming at him for being a sexist pig just for singing a song. And I remember sort of like stepping in between the two and just saying, hey man, just get over it. Let's go. Let's walk away. And this girl, she was sort of like standing perpendicular to me, because I sort of like stepped in between the two of them, right? And she like smacked me on the shoulder. And I'm sure like Spaniards, so you kind of know how they gesticulate with their hands and everything. And so like she smacked me on the shoulder, but kind of like a slap, like swatting a fly or a mosquito. But again, that instinct to just get physical without thinking of any of the repercussions, not caring at all, knowing that they can. Because this isn't anything new. Think of any classical film from the 50s, from the 40s. Think of medieval romantic poetry. How many times can the woman just smack the man across the face? You've insulted my honor. Boom, here's a smack. You've said something I don't like. Here's a smack. You're stepping in front of the man I'm yelling at in the face. A man I don't even know. Here's a smack on your shoulder. And you're just allowed to get away with it. And again, like, I just remember I turned and sort of looked at her with an arched eyebrow, like, what was that, woman? What is wrong with you? But now just imagine that is occurring every single day in the schools, whether it's amongst the students themselves, the girl students doing that to the boy students. It's happening in homes, wives doing that to their husbands, girlfriends doing that to their boyfriends, and no one cares. It's totally overlooked. But then the second there's a reaction, imagine if I turned around and just clocked that woman, right? I would be in prison. I would have my life ruined. I'd be another statistic of evil men in Spain perpetuating the pandemic of violence against women. This is the world we're in.
there'd be a dozen documentaries on you.
Yeah,
with all the creepy music and the close-ups,
yeah, exactly. My picture would be everywhere. Man in Andalusia punches woman. Oh my gosh, caught on camera. Another act of violencia machista. But it's like the urge is the thing that I'm talking about, like evaluating female behavior, is that it's that urge, or maybe it's not even urge. It's just simply that instinct that it's just that instinctual action that women just hit and get physical without thinking at all, because why would they? For eons they've been allowed to do this, and there's no consequence to it.
Getting back to the crocodile tears, that's another thing we should mention, because I've had girlfriends and they can it's kind of funny, but it's sinister, and but yet it's natural. You can think of how the male evolved and how the female evolved, and the brains, although there's plasticity, we still have the lizard brain in there, and they know that they just have to cry to get what they want, because they can't match us in the physical stakes. So to convince you to do something you don't want to do, she can cry. And when you see a woman crying, you feel terrible and you want to stop her crying. It's more or less when you see a child crying, you don't want the child to cry. And in some cases you'll give in, you'll say, oh, okay, right, we'll do it your way. But you can often notice that women will start crying, and if you leave the room, they think, let's say you're in her apartment and you leave and the door closes, and she presumes you're gone. She presumes you've gone down the corridor and you've left the building. The crying stops immediately. So we don't mention that there are a lot of women, I'm not saying all women, but there are a lot of women who can cry when they want to cry, and they can stop crying when they want to stop crying.
Oh yeah,
So
just like children.
it's very manipulative. Yeah, it's very manipulative. But
we all have our, like that, and again, like you were saying, that comes from different evolutionary strategies, and I don't want to make it seem like we're bitter towards women. Like I think women are lovely, and I am sad to see what has become of modern women, largely because of feminism and terrible women figures in society over the decades and centuries. I'm horrified at the denigration of femininity, and I think we need, as I am a traditionalist, one of my core principles is we need to bring back and celebrate traditional masculinity and masculine roles, gender roles, and traditional femininity. There is your solution. But for those of us who have to live in this world, like that situation you've described, there's a lot of men out there who didn't grow up with fathers. And if they did, their fathers didn't teach them this stuff because they were too busy working all day, or they weren't adequate fathers when it came to these sorts of life lessons, imparting this wisdom. And so there's a lot of men, young boys, young men, even men now getting into middle age, who don't know how to react to these situations. And I made a video about this a couple of years ago, because I think that the dissident right, a lot of the online right, a lot of conservative movements are getting this really, really wrong, because they like to even go after the MGTOW boys, and they like to go after the men's rights activists just as much as the leftists and the feminists do, but they do it for other reasons. So the trad calves, the base conservative types will insult MGTOW or men's rights, or even like the pickup artist communities, for being all sorts of things, for being just as bad, for encouraging just as much division between the sexes. That's a criticism leveled at the MGTOW. For being cringe and for being hedonistic. That's a criticism leveled at the pickup artist guys. But I actually disagree, and I think that there's a lot of truth and utilitarian truth that can be found in the MGTOW communities, in the pickup artist even communities. And let's not forget that the normalization of the phrase red pilled, taking the red pill, actually came from obviously the Matrix film, but really as a cultural, political thing, meme, it came from the men's rights. It came from taking the red pill on the sexes, on women, on relationships, and then it spread to other things. But that's where it really came from. And there's a lot of wisdom and practical wisdom in those spheres. And so, like you were talking about that example of the female, the woman who can just cry like an actress and turn it on and turn it off, and many other situations, you know, there's a lot to learn there, and there's a lot of solutions there as well. So, you know, making sure that we're not just, you know, black pilling about, you know, the state of men and women today. If you are a young man in this type of situation, your country is increasingly matriarchal, increasingly a feminist dictatorship, and you are increasingly demonized just for being a boy, it's very difficult. You're walking not just on eggshells, you're walking on hot coals. You're walking on shards of glass. It's not only dangerous, it's also uncomfortable and painful to be in this situation. And, you know, to the extent that you might be aware of these things, changes things. A lot of times I wonder if, you know, most young men, most you know, teenagers, young men, men in their 20s are even aware of these potential pitfalls. To the extent that they are, then it can get pretty depressing. Like, man, I don't even want to talk to girls because I'm afraid for all sorts of things. I'm afraid not just of getting rejected and being embarrassed and having a blow to my self-esteem. No, I'm afraid of getting in legal trouble. I'm afraid of getting my life ruined. And so, no, it's not good to just demonize the MGTOW crowd and the men's rights activist crowd. I think we should actually listen to what they have to say and take some of their criticisms to heart. They aren't sowing division. They aren't just trying to blackpill. They have some legitimate criticisms and advice that could save people's lives. So, like, one thing is, you know, I don't think you should, I don't think it's necessary to promote marriage, even as a traditionalist, even as a conservative. You have to live in the world you're in, and you don't have to mold to this world. You don't have to adapt to it. You don't have to succumb to it, but you should be aware of what it's like. And the concept of marriage, the institution, quote unquote, of marriage, offers very little to men in the modern world. It offers pretty much nothing to men in the modern world. And actually, many women don't offer much to men. Like, most women don't know how to cook. They don't want to cook. You mentioned fertility rates earlier. They don't even want to have kids. And it's not that women want this. They've been psyoped into wanting these things or behaving these ways. But it's something to be aware of. But the idea of, like, you know, a lot of traditional conservative, you know, movements and voices will be encouraging, oh, the solution is that we need to, you know, go out there, go to the gym, get jacked, and, you know, be excellent, marry a girl, and everything will be fine. Go marry that trad girl with a French braid running through the wheat fields in a polka dot dress. Right. Give me a break. Get real. Like, literally, get real. Live in the real world. No, I wouldn't recommend getting married to any man, because there's all sorts of no-fault divorce. There's all sorts of ways in which a man can have his life ruined because of a marriage that goes sour. And the divorce courts are completely rigged against men. And one of the number one causes of male death is suicide, deaths of despair. And one of the main reasons that men fall into such despair is because they get their lives completely destroyed and everything taken from them by their ex-wives in divorce court. So why, as someone who cares about, you know, our people and our society, why would I just say no, keep believing in this institution of marriage? No, you have to be clever about this. You have to be as wise as serpents about this. So that's one thing. It's just, you know, keep your wits about you.
I'd say that although I don't really believe in the basic concept of the MGTOW movement, because I believe in the idea of reproduction. I can understand, as you said, that there are things, let's say, the dissident right can extract from the MGTOW, because the MGTOW do point at problems. I don't believe, I don't believe in the solution of the MGTOWs. Just going your
I
own
think
way.
every man should MGTOW for a moment, for a period of his life. It's a good thing to do, and there's different levels of going MGTOW. There's different levels of going your own way. There's like complete, hermit Tibetan monk level, but then there's also just like just toning down your interest and your concern with being with getting a girl, like just take women off a pedestal in your life, put women down a bit lower on the list of priorities in your life, and focus on other things. And more often than not, as you're doing that, you'll find that you just attract women naturally because you're exuding a very attractive vibe. You're just a man who's pursuing his interests, he's pursuing his own goals. That's attractive. He's taking care of himself. He's in good shape physically. He seems like a nice guy, and wow, actually, because he's not obsessed with getting the girls, and he's not obsessed with that whole pickup, hookup culture lifestyle. No, he actually might be interesting to talk to and have things to say, and so it actually it's a healthy thing to do. And when you're young, you don't have much to offer women anyway, because it's so difficult to have a lot of wealth or experience racked up when you're in your early 20s. So just focus on other things during that time, and then it's not that you're writing up women off completely, but you're kind of going your own way for a few years. That's all. But yeah, then there's like the other extreme is like going completely like, I hate women, so I'm gonna write them off completely.
You have the MGTOW who just ends up spending the rest of their days in a back shed listening to the ham radio. I don't think women are too attracted to those guys, So yeah, I should mention as well, because I was reading a book. I've only really started it. I was reading Spanish etymology. It was very interesting about how it's come from Latin, but also you've got Arabic words, and it's taken words from English, it's taken words from French. But in Spanish, wedding is boda, and it comes from the Latin for vows. So the emphasis was the vows, whereas in English, wedding is like two things coming together. So I just thought that was interesting, and vows obviously these days don't really mean anything in sickness and in health. In sickness and in health means nothing today. And a good example of this is in Spain, let's say 15 years ago, you didn't really have retirement homes. They didn't exist. When parents got old, their children tended to look after them in their own home, in the parents' home, the elderly parents' home, or in their own homes. Failing that, they would maybe get some help. And now what you have these days is either you have a lot of old people in old folks' homes, and we found out about that during the scamdemic. And I was very surprised. I was thinking, my God, I didn't know there were so many old folks' homes in Spain. And that's a new phenomenon. You've also got what they do now is they will get migrants generally from Latin America or from the Philippines to look after their parents in the home, which I think is better than sending them to a retirement home. But it's not the children looking after their parents, They're still getting someone else to look after an important family member. So it's kind of a sign of the times, but it's quite depressing to see it. Divorce is very high in Spain. It's very high actually in several Latin American countries. It's traditionally Catholic countries. For example, Argentina and even Mexico. Divorce.
Even Italy.
Yeah.
Italy was like I remember not very long ago that like when someone in my family got divorced, it was like a big deal because it was not very long, like ages ago, actually, like 2 decades ago. But yeah, even in Italy, it was like, what, a divorce? Wow, it was even just like 20, 25 years ago. It wasn't a big. It was a big deal to get a divorce. Now, give me a break all the time.
I remember in the 90s, that's when in Ireland, some couples, well, husbands and wives, they got divorced. They started, to get divorced. And if you ever saw the man, in the space of 6 months, he would have aged 10 years. He just wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating. He had given up. As you say, he would have lost everything he had worked for, just gone, taken from him by the courts, more or less. And I should say as well, because you mentioned that these days, like, because I feel kind of lucky, because when I was in my late teens and in my 20s, let's say you're in a cafe, or you're in a pub, or you're in a bookshop, and there's a woman there and you think she's pretty, you could try to chat her up, and you weren't terrified that you'd end up in a police station. But these days, when you're out and about, you don't generally see, a young man and a young woman who are strangers suddenly striking up a conversation. They don't really give any eye contact at all. Let's say the woman is pretty and the man is handsome, but nothing really happens. And I'm guessing that's because of the culture. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure. Like, it's difficult. I don't want to oversell, because again, like, trying to make sure that we're also, and to anyone who's listening, we're not just complaining, but also talking about ways to live in this sort of Kali Yuga, end times, civilizational decline. I don't know how prevalent this is, or how dangerous it is. I think one of the big red pills you need to take, and this is something that the MGTOW community gets right, and this is something that the men's activist guys get right, and this is something that the pickup artist guys get right, is that...
Sorry, is this a coach red pill?
No.
All right. I couldn't resist. Sorry.
I don't know. It might be something he said. That's how he got his fame, was doing like videos on, like the relations between men and women. But one of the things that you simply have to understand is that women will allow men, alpha men, to behave in ways that they would usually complain about. Alpha men get away with it. And Trump was right about this, right? What did he say? You can grab them by the pussy. If you got money, they let you do it. That was the phrase that people didn't remember. They focused on the grab them by the pussy line. But the line that followed after was, they let you do that. That was the line that everyone should have focused on. Because not only was it clearly showing that he doesn't do it against their will, he's not accosting them, they let you do it. If you are rich, if you are charismatic, if you are good looking, if you have something that they want, if you are desirable, women will allow you to approach them, will allow you to touch them, will allow you to ask them for their phone numbers, do all sorts of things, because they're attracted to you, because you exude something that they find attractive. Whereas if you don't have those things, I think there's even a meme about it. Like, now there's this cartoon image of like the ugly guy, this ugly fat guy at the office, pops into one of the like girls into her office, and he's just saying like, "Hey, you look nice today," and the woman screams, HR, I'm being abused, I'm being what's the term? Not abused, I'm being harassed, right? And then in the other panel of the cartoon, same type of situation, but now the guy coming in is like Chad. He's jacked, he's got a nice jawline, he's well dressed, and he's got a full head of hair, and he comes into the office and says, "Hey, Susan, you're looking nice today." And she's like, "Oh, thank you. Do you want to get a coffee later?" So this is true. And so, and then what I've observed too is, even in my own life, and then I've also seen this play out, is that I still see people will go out, and when it's in the context of like the low lit, loud music bar or discoteca, when everyone's had a few drinks in them, the flirting is it's like the jungle, right? Everyone's flirting. Guys are chatting up girls, girls are chatting up guys, people are making out, strangers are hooking up, and whether or not that's good or bad, that's not what I'm addressing here. What I'm saying is, clearly people are still behaving in ways that are like natural, I guess. It's natural for men to want to be with women, it's natural for women to want to be with the men that they're attracted to, and there doesn't seem to be so much fear. But maybe that's because I'm in a smaller town, whereas in bigger cities it might be different. I'm not so sure. I didn't notice this. I didn't notice this in Granada, even, which is like a feminist dictatorship mecca, capital of that, where people still were going out and flirting and hooking up, and Tinder is obviously in Spain as well. People are using that, so it's not like, I don't want this to make it sound like you can't even talk to a girl, or you might have your life in ruins. But what has happened is that there is all of the potential in the world is there for that to happen, and every avenue is wide open for a woman to take and decide, well, actually, no, I didn't like that sexual experience. I regret it. And in fact, now I'm going to say that I wasn't being a whore. No. I won't let my reputation be besmirched and people start calling me a whore. No, I'm going to simply say that I was raped. Or and we saw this happen with the Me Too. There were dozens of cases of this. Some guy gets accused of being a rapist or a harasser or etc. And actually, it was just an unpleasant date that the girl didn't like. So this is real.
Right. I should say that the Chad, let's say he's 18 today, but he's grown up through the education system, and maybe he's got some information from an uncle who's been through the ringer. He's been brought through the divorce courts. He's spoken to his older brother who got into trouble for chatting up a girl. So what I mean is, when you're brought up in this environment, even if you are a Chad, you're going to be a little bit more hesitant about
Sure,
chatting up a girl. But I do agree.
I could even say, like, in my case, it wasn't so much that in my real life, I fell into these dangerous traps and these dangerous situations where a woman could do that. What happened when I was like a young lad, when I was in my late teens, or when I was in high school or whatever, it was simply being exposed to all of the media, all of the articles, all of the even exercises in our school textbooks about how women are so oppressed, how men are such abusers, how our system is a patriarchal system which oppresses women. And there's I remember, when I was I think it was like in my early 20s, this famous op-ed piece in, I think, the Atlantic magazine called The End of Men, or maybe it was even a book was written called The End of Men. And it's all about how men are useless, men are worthless, we don't need them anymore. And it's a good thing because they're just a bunch of oppressors anyway. And I internalized that. I sort of hung my head and was like, yeah, I guess I am just a useless white man. And I guess it's time for women to rise up, and I should just, keep quiet and not be an oppressor, not be rude, not make women feel uncomfortable. So I remember there was a few years of my life where I was really just a wallflower, timid. I didn't want to offend women, didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable or oppressed or threatened. So I behaved in a very emasculated, timid, fearful, shy way around women, and didn't have much luck with women in those years because I had no idea what they wanted. I had no idea that I was actually being psyoped and lied to and manipulated by horrible people in the mainstream and the establishment who were pumping my brain with poison. And how I got out of that was just actually, I got fed up living in those conditions, in that psychic condition. And I decided, fuck this. No. I'm going to be like James Bond. I'm going to be like Clint Eastwood. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to talk to women. I'm going to pursue women that I want. And I'm not going to be afraid. And actually, that's what I was saying earlier. When you go into these situations with an alpha male mentality, it's so funny how everything changes. And actually, all that bullshit that's written in the New York Times or on, Jezebel magazine, and like all these feminist complaints are total lies and hypocrisies, and actually just completely untrue. Because the vast majority of women out there, they might talk this talk. They might use these expressions like micromachismos and all this stuff. And they might attend 8 de marzo, feminist marches and all that shit. But really, they still want Chad. They still want alpha. And if you are that, they will be attracted to you. They will come to you. And it's just so funny because it's it's just such a blatant hypocrisy. But it goes back to the thing you were saying about how like 1 in 5 women has rape fantasies, and yeah, like every feminist woman is probably really disappointed with her love life and really disappointed with all the male feminists who are in her social circle, and she probably wants nothing more than alpha male right wing Chad to throw her down and have his way with her. So yeah, it's a fine line. It's a curious world to be in. It's a curious time to be in. But yeah, it's I'm not I'm not sure men, young boys need to feel like, oh, there's just no sense in talking to girls. No, what you need to do is make sure that you are doing it in a way that first cover all your bases, make sure that you never do anything that could incriminate you or allow women to take those wide open avenues which could lead to your demise. But also, like, don't be beta. Don't be afraid. Don't let this system and these lies oppress you and make you someone who you aren't. No, go to the gym, be fit, get jacked, pursue excellence, focus on your goals and your hobbies. Give that woman something that she probably hasn't experienced. A man who is confident in his masculinity, in himself, isn't afraid of women, isn't afraid to tell a woman to be quiet, isn't afraid to tell a woman, don't ever raise your hands against me again. Don't be afraid to put women in their place. And we do have places. Men have places, women have places. And I think that if you behave in that way, if you behave with confidence and honor and dignity, and also with a bit of intelligence, covering your bases, making sure that you never put yourself in dangerous situations, I think you'll be fine, even in these times.
Yeah, I would say be very assertive with women. They do like it. I remember dating a girl, and I would say she was kind of left wing. Most women are generally. They don't want to stick out. They want to be like everyone else. And whatever I was saying anyway, she suddenly said to me, "You probably don't even think women should vote." And I looked her in the eye and I said, "Actually, I don't." And she found that very attractive, that I wouldn't say what the mealy mouthed, betas probably in the university were saying.
Mm-hmm.
I actually told her what I thought. I said, "No, actually, I don't think women should vote." And yeah, she seemed to like that, which was strange because it went against all her feminist spiel. So you have a point on that. I should say we'll wrap this up in about 8 or 9 minutes. But the interesting part of this is that feminism is an ideology. It's generally unnatural. We've said that it's come. I actually recommend people read Howard's End by E.M. Forster. I read it a few years ago, and it gives you kind of a sense of how feminism started. It did not start among the working class. It was very much top down,
Mm-hmm.
and the messengers for it were aristocratic women with too much time on their hands and a lot of money, who threw soirees and all the rest. So I should say the problem is, you can say it's an ideology. It's only an ideology. But the problem is, we can see it here in Spain. This ideology, in just a few short decades, has led to a horrendous fertility problem. There are cities in Spain you can walk around and you'll barely see a child.
Mm.
I lived in an apartment block a couple of years ago. There were 20 apartments in the building. There was only one family, a man and a woman and 2 children. Maybe the children were 4 and 6 or something like that, in 20 apartments. And in that city, you could walk around and maybe for half an hour you're going through busy streets and you don't see a single child. So this is what happens when you introduce a pernicious and very toxic ideology into your country and it's not challenged. It leads to practically the end of an ethnic group, the end of an ethnic group, because women have the keys to the future. They have the keys to the future. And when
Oh,
their
sure.
minds are corrupted, it's the end of all of us. So I leave you, Pox, with the final word. And thank you very much for coming on. And also, Pox's the links to his channel are in the description. And if you're watching, if he mirrors this and you're watching it on his channel, you should find the links to my channel. Thank you very much, Pox Populi.
Thank you for inviting me on for another interesting conversation about a topic that I think is probably one of the most important. Yeah, what you're saying about the fertility rates and motherhood and things like that, and that last line about how women have the keys. I said in that video I referenced, the one that I made a few years ago, I said in that video that the future is female. Always is. Just not in the way that the feminists think. The future is female in that we don't have a future without the participation of women in our future, in our society, in our civilization. And one of the most fundamental roles that women have is that they are life givers. They are life makers. I don't understand. I suppose I understand it, but it is still flabbergasting how feminism was the tool which denigrated motherhood. It was the tool which chipped away at and then completely obliterated motherhood as something to aspire to, as something to celebrate. And we still celebrate Mother's Day, but it's bullshit. And it has been also so successful in psyoping women into believing that they don't want children. And I know from personal experience, like you were saying, this block of flats in these cities that have no children in them, almost everyone in my group of friends, well, my former friends, I no longer really have friends anymore over the past 2 years of scandemic and all that kind of stuff, and for various reasons, which I've mentioned before. I don't really have a social life because I've just been so disappointed with people and even excluded from them now. So even if I wanted to. But anyway, every single one of them is childless. Every single one is childless. And, you know, we're all getting into our 30s now, or even in my case, like I'm approaching my mid 30s. And it's just like, in my case, I've wanted children, whether when I was with certain, you know, women in my life, I wanted to have children with them or even get married, you know, that sort of thing, until I saw some more like stuff, you know, I got a bit more realistic about it. But in my group of friends, they don't even want children. It doesn't cross their minds. It's actually something they abhor. They abhor the idea of children. They run away from it. You know, I've had relationships with women where that became one of the cracks in the relationship that ultimately ruined the relationship, was that she didn't want kids at all. Not a maternal desire in her body at all. And that's a huge red flag. But when you've invested in the relationship, you've invested care in what you think is love in that person, well, you turn a blind eye to it. You hope that maybe you can change the person. And actually, it is possible, you know, if you, again, like show, we were talking about earlier, demonstrating that those characteristics, if you show that, you know, you can be this woman has a future with you as a wife, as a mother, you can show her the positive sides of a bucolic domestic lifestyle, etc. That person might even change and start seeing the appeal to being a mother, and the biological clock kicks in and all sorts of stuff could change. And I think it does, because there are all sorts of studies have been done that show that modern women are increasingly unhappy. They're the most unhappy women ever in comparison to their mothers, to their grandmothers, to their great-grandmothers, who are supposedly even more oppressed by the patriarchy than they are. But they are far more unhappy. And why? Because they're not living as they should, because our natural order has been subverted and inverted and polluted and contaminated. Nobody is doing what they ought to. Nobody's fulfilled in their daily lives, their work, their efforts. And everyone is confused and doing things that they ought not to do and doing things that don't fulfill them, like working in an office for a jackass instead of being at home, caring for your children, raising your children, maintaining a lovely home, you know, moving around the furniture, painting and laughing with your children and all that sort of thing, which has now been sold to women as oppression, servitude, slavery. And so, yeah, this is very harmful, and it has completely decimated birth rates. And the solution, actually, we talk about, there's so many men in these online spheres. It's such a male dominant sphere. So when we talk about solutions, it's all being looked at from the male perspective. But actually, this solution is in the hands of women. The future is female. If we want to reverse declining birth rates, which I will say isn't, that I'm not so concerned about population decline or anything like that. There's more Europeans alive today than there ever have been. I don't believe we're like at the point of going extinct, but we're at the point of being replaced, sure. And in any case, if the lack of birth is because of the hatred at the idea of being a mother or of having children, because you'd rather work as a girl boss, or not even the girl boss, just an office drone, that's a problem. Okay, so I do understand that. But it's a problem that women are going to solve. This problem, the keys to solving this problem, are in the hands of women. Women have to overcome the psyop that is feminism. And just like, red pilling people about September 11th, the Second World War, COVID, very often all you can do is sort of plant the seed and then let them go on the path of discovery themselves. And so as men of the online right, the dissident right, conservative right, traditionalist right, what have you, it's important not to overdo it and impose ourselves on women and scare them off or to be too overbearing. We have to just plant the seed and let them discover on their own, let them swallow the red pill on their own that they've been lied to. And women who are on this sort of, in this Cosa Nostra of the online right or whatever, need to help out a lot in this. And I think a lot of them are, and that's good to see. And yeah, we'll cross our fingers and see how this goes. And again, this is one of the things that you can control in your personal life too, is that you can decide how you want to live as a man. You can decide how you want to live as a woman if you want to be traditional and pursue traditional masculinity, and as a woman pursue traditional femininity. And I think you will be rewarded very well if you do so. So I'll leave it on that note.